You think you can just cut in line because you're a woman? The security guard's hand struck her shoulder hard, shoving her back from the checkpoint. The busy terminal fell silent as passengers turned to stare. Then she slowly reached into her jacket, pulled out a small leather wallet, and everything changed when he saw what was inside. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The incident happened at Meridian International Airport on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. The security checkpoint buzzed with the usual chaos of business travelers, vacation families, and college students rushing to catch flights. Long lines snaked through the terminal, patience wearing thin as delays mounted and tempers flared in the humid August heat. Cassandra Vale stood quietly in the priority security line, her slight frame barely reaching 5 feet 3 inches. She wore a simple navy blazer over dark pants, carried a modest black briefcase, and moved with the unremarkable efficiency of any frequent business traveler. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose gave her the appearance of a librarian or perhaps a middle management office worker. Nothing about her suggested importance. Nothing about her commanded attention. She was precisely the kind of person who blended into crowds, who waited patiently in lines, who apologized when others bumped into her. The kind of person who, in a world obsessed with status and appearance, remained perpetually invisible. Behind her in the regular security line stood dozens of frustrated passengers, including a group of rowdy college students returning from spring break, their voices echoing through the terminal as they complained about the wait. "This is ridiculous," one of them shouted. "We've been here for an hour." Ahead of Cassandra, the priority line moved steadily. First-class passengers, airline elite members, and TSA pre-check travelers flashed their boarding passes and identification cards, gliding through security with practiced ease. She had her documents ready, standing patiently behind a businessman in an expensive suit who was loudly discussing merger negotiations on his phone. That's when Derek Thornton arrived for his shift. At 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders and arms like tree trunks, Derek commanded attention wherever he went. He'd been working airport security for 8 months, ever since his discharge from the Army following what he described as a personality conflict with his commanding officer. The truth, known only to his personnel file, was more complicated: a pattern of aggressive behavior, difficulty following orders from female superiors, and an incident involving excessive force that had nearly resulted in a court-martial. But at Meridian Airport, Derek was just another security guard trying to maintain order in an increasingly chaotic world. His supervisor had called in sick, leaving Derek in charge of the priority security checkpoint during the morning rush. It was exactly the kind of responsibility that fed his sense of authority, the kind of power that made him feel important again. He'd been watching the lines with growing irritation. The regular security queue had backed up nearly to the main entrance, while the priority line moved smoothly. In Derek's mind, this represented everything wrong with society: special treatment for people who thought they were better than everyone else, cutting in line while hardworking Americans waited their turn. His mood had been sour since arriving at work. His ex-wife had called about late child support payments. His landlord had left another threatening voicemail about overdue rent. His application to join the city police force had been rejected for the 3rd time, with no explanation beyond "does not meet current departmental standards." Everything in Derek's life seemed designed to remind him that he was powerless, overlooked, disrespected. So when he saw Cassandra approaching the priority checkpoint, something inside him snapped. She didn't look like the typical priority passenger. No expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, no obvious markers of wealth or status. Her briefcase was worn around the edges, her shoes practical rather than fashionable. to Derek's trained eye for spotting troublemakers. She looked like someone trying to sneak into a line she didn't belong in. "Excuse me." "Ma'am." Derek's voice carried the sharp edge of authority as he stepped directly into Cassandra's path. "This line is for priority passengers only. You need to move to the regular security line." Cassandra looked up, her gray eyes meeting his gaze steadily. "I have priority access," she said quietly, her voice carrying no challenge, no defensiveness. Just a simple statement of fact. Derek's jaw tightened. He'd heard that tone before, calm, measured, the kind of voice that suggested someone thought they were better than him. It was the same tone his female commanding officer had used when delivering the reprimand that ended his military career. The same tone his ex-wife used when she talked about his anger management issues. During their divorce proceedings, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Let me see your boarding pass," he demanded, stepping closer. His bulk cast a shadow over her smaller frame. Cassandra reached into her briefcase with the same calm efficiency she'd shown throughout the morning. She produced a standard airline boarding pass, nothing fancy or special about it. Derek examined it closely, looking for any sign that she was trying to deceive him. "This doesn't show priority status," he announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You're trying to cut in line." "That's not happening on my watch." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The businessman ahead of them paused his phone call to watch the confrontation unfold. Even the college students in the distant regular line craned their necks to see what was happening. Cassandra's expression didn't change. No anger, no embarrassment, no fear. Just patient attention, as if she were waiting for Derek to finish, so they could resolve this misunderstanding and everyone could continue with their day. But her calm only fueled Derek's rage. In his experience, people who remained composed under pressure were usually hiding something. They were usually the ones who thought they were too good to be questioned by someone like him. "You think you can just cut in line because you're a woman?" The words exploded from Derek's mouth before he could stop them. His hand shot out, striking her shoulder hard enough to push her back 2 steps from the checkpoint. The terminal fell completely silent. Then Cassandra slowly reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a small leather wallet, and opened it with deliberate care. She held it up so Derek could see what was inside, and everything changed when he saw her rank. The morning shift at Meridian International Airport had begun like countless others before it. Terminal C buzzed with the predictable rhythm of commercial aviation, the steady hum of rolling luggage, the crackling announcements over intercoms, and the soft shuffle of thousands of feet moving across polished floors. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, aircraft taxied along runways while ground crews prepared for another day of departures and arrivals. Cassandra Vale had arrived at the airport 90 minutes before her scheduled departure, exactly as she had done every Tuesday for the past 6 months. Her routine was precise, methodical, and utterly unremarkable. She parked in the same section of the long-term garage, took the same shuttle route to the terminal, and always stopped at the same coffee cart near the entrance. "The usual, Miss Vale?" asked Raymond, the cart operator who had served her weekly since spring. He was one of the few people at Meridian who knew her name, though only because it was printed on the credit card she used to pay. "Thank you, Raymond. Black coffee." "No sugar." Her voice carried the gentle politeness of someone accustomed to being forgettable. She left a $2 tip, the same amount every week, and offered a brief smile before disappearing into the crowd to every observer. Cassandra appeared to be exactly what she seemed, a mid-level business professional making routine trips between cities. Her attire spoke of careful budgeting rather than expense accounts. Her briefcase was genuine leather but showed years of wear at the corners and handle. Even her choice of airline reflected practicality over comfort. She flew coach on a regional carrier that offered direct flights to her destination for half the price of the major airlines. The truth was that Cassandra had spent considerable effort cultivating this appearance of ordinariness. Every detail of her public persona had been carefully constructed to deflect attention, to blend seamlessly into the background of everyday life. It was a skill she had learned through necessity, refined through years of practice, and maintained through constant vigilance. Derek Thornton, meanwhile, was experiencing the kind of mourning that made him question every decision that had led him to this point in his life. The alarm clock in his cramped apartment had failed to wake him, leaving him rushing through a cold shower and grabbing a stale donut for breakfast. Traffic on Interstate 405 had been heavier than usual, making him 15 minutes late for a job that already felt like a daily exercise in humiliation. At 34 years old, Derek had imagined his life would look different by now. The military career that was supposed to provide structure and purpose had ended in disgrace. The marriage that was supposed to offer stability had dissolved in bitter arguments and legal fees. The dreams of becoming a police officer had been crushed by background checks that revealed too many red flags to ignore. Airport security work wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be a stepping stone, a way to pay bills while he figured out his next move. But 8 months had passed, and Derek found himself settling into routines that felt increasingly like permanent defeat. He lived paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like the Thai restaurant downstairs. His social life consisted of drinking alone while watching television shows about the kind of life he would never have. The only compensation for his circumstances was the small measure of authority that came with his uniform and badge. Behind the security checkpoint, Derek could make decisions that affected other people's days. He could ask questions that demanded answers. He could require compliance from passengers who, in any other setting, wouldn't give him a second glance. It was a modest form of power, but it was the only power Derek possessed, and he had learned to extract maximum satisfaction from its exercise. The Meridian International Airport security checkpoint reflected the careful balance between safety and efficiency that defined modern air travel. Banks of X-ray machines processed an endless stream of carry-on luggage while metal detectors scanned passengers for prohibited items. Transportation Security Administration officers moved with practiced efficiency, their actions guided by protocols developed through years of trial and refinement. Priority Security Line existed as a concession to the reality that some passengers generated more revenue for airlines than others. First-class ticket holders, frequent flyer elite members, and travelers who paid additional fees could bypass the longer regular security line in exchange for expedited processing. The system was designed to reward customer loyalty while generating additional income streams for cash-strapped airlines. In theory, the priority line was supposed to be clearly marked and strictly enforced. In practice, enforcement often depended on the attention and disposition of individual security officers. During busy periods, with multiple lines moving simultaneously and hundreds of passengers flowing through the checkpoint, it was easy for travelers to end up in the wrong queue, either by accident or design. Cassandra approached the priority checkpoint with the same unremarkable efficiency she brought to every aspect of her public life. Her boarding pass was ready, her identification card prepared, her laptop and electronics already removed from her briefcase in anticipation of the security screening process. She had made this journey so many times that every movement was automatic, requiring no conscious thought or attention. She noticed Derek immediately, of course. Years of training had taught her to assess potential threats within seconds of entering any environment. His body language spoke of barely controlled aggression, the kind of tension that suggested someone looking for an excuse to assert dominance. His positioning near the checkpoint indicated authority, while his facial expression suggested someone having a particularly difficult day. Under different circumstances, Cassandra might have chosen to avoid potential confrontation by moving to the regular security line. The delay would have been minimal, and maintaining her low profile was always the priority. But her flight was already running behind schedule due to weather delays. And she had learned from experience that drawing attention through unusual behavior could be more problematic than maintaining normal patterns. So she remained in the priority line, standing patiently behind the businessman conducting his merger negotiations, waiting for her turn to present her credentials and pass through security screening. She had no way of knowing that Derek had already identified her as a problem, or that the collision course between them was now unavoidable. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal truths neither of them was prepared to face. The weeks leading up to that Tuesday morning had established a pattern of small humiliations and casual dismissals that shaped how people saw Cassandra Vale at Meridian Airport. She had become part of the invisible infrastructure, noticed only when something went wrong, forgotten as soon as problems were resolved. The coffee cart incident 3 weeks earlier had set the tone. A businessman in expensive suit had knocked her coffee from her hands while rushing to catch his flight, the hot liquid splashing across her modest blazer and briefcase. Instead of apologizing, he had muttered something about people needing to watch where they were going and disappeared into the crowd. Raymond, the cart operator, had offered to replace her coffee for free, but she had politely declined, cleaned up the spill herself, and continued to her gate without complaint. Airport employees had witnessed the exchange with varying degrees of interest. Some felt sympathy for the quiet woman who seemed to absorb other people's rudeness without fighting back. Others interpreted her response as weakness, the behavior of someone who lacked the confidence to demand respect. A few didn't notice at all, treating the incident as background noise in their daily routines. Derek Thornton had been among those who noticed, though his interpretation differed significantly from the sympathetic observers. From his perspective, Cassandra's failure to assert herself represented everything he despised about people who accepted mistreatment. In his experience, the world divided into 2 categories: those who demanded respect and those who invited abuse. Her willingness to clean up someone else's mess marked her clearly as belonging to the second category. The following Tuesday, another incident had reinforced these perceptions. Cassandra had been standing in the regular security line when a family with young children cut ahead of her, claiming they needed extra time for their screening process. The mother had looked directly at Cassandra while making this announcement, clearly expecting some form of resistance or complaint. Instead, Cassandra had simply stepped aside, allowing the family to move ahead without comment. Other passengers had grumbled about the unfairness, but she had remained silent, checking her phone and adjusting her departure calculations to account for the additional delay. A supervisor had approached to ask if she wanted to file a complaint about the line cutting, explaining that such behavior violated airport policies and could result in penalties for the offending passengers. Cassandra had thanked him for his attention but declined to pursue the matter, stating that the delay was manageable and not worth the administrative effort. Word of these incidents spread through the airport's informal communication networks. Security guards, TSA officers, airline employees, and service workers all shared information about passengers who caused problems, demanded special treatment, or otherwise disrupted normal operations. Cassandra earned a reputation as someone who absorbed whatever treatment others decided to give her, never complaining, never demanding better, never asserting rights or privileges. Derek had heard these stories with growing contempt. In his worldview, shaped by military training and personal disappointments, respect was earned through strength and lost through weakness. Cassandra's passive responses to mistreatment marked her as someone who had given up fighting for herself, someone who had accepted defeat so completely that she no longer recognized opportunities to assert dignity. His own experiences with workplace harassment had been different. when fellow soldiers had challenged his authority or questioned his decisions. Derek had responded with escalating aggression until the situation was resolved in his favor, or transferred to higher command for resolution. When his ex-wife had criticized his behavior during their marriage, he had argued, shouted, and ultimately walked away rather than accept what he perceived as unjustified attacks on his character. Contrast between his approach and Cassandra's created a cognitive framework that would prove catastrophic. Derek had learned to interpret quiet confidence as hidden arrogance, calm responses as calculated manipulation, and patient endurance as passive-aggressive resistance. In his experience, people who remained composed under pressure were usually planning something, usually convinced of their superiority, usually looking for opportunities to demonstrate their assumed advantages. Other airport employees had drawn different conclusions from observing Cassandra's behavior. Maria Santos, who worked at the airline customer service desk, had noticed that Cassandra never complained about flight delays, never demanded upgrades or special accommodations, and never raised her voice when dealing with travel disruptions. In Maria's experience, such behavior usually indicated either exceptional self-control or profound resignation to circumstances beyond personal influence. James Park, a maintenance supervisor who had worked at Meridian for 15 years, had developed his own theory about the quiet woman who appeared every Tuesday. He had observed enough business travelers to recognize the difference between those who traveled by choice and those who traveled by necessity. Cassandra's worn briefcase, practical clothing, and economy ticket selection suggested someone making required trips rather than preferred ones. The baggage handlers had their own perspective. Tony Rodriguez had noticed that Cassandra always checked the same small suitcase, never exceeded weight limits, and never claimed priority handling despite her frequent travel. In Tony's experience, such consistent behavior patterns usually indicated either military training or professional requirements that demanded precise adherence to regulations. Even the janitorial staff had formed opinions about the woman who appeared weekly in Terminal C. Elena Petrov, who cleaned the waiting areas near Cassandra's usual gate, had observed that she always disposed of her coffee cups properly, never left newspapers or magazines behind, and never occupied more space than absolutely necessary. Elena had worked around enough business travelers to appreciate those who treated airport facilities with consideration for the people who had to maintain them. These various observations had created a mosaic of perceptions about Cassandra Vale, but none of the observers had access to the complete picture. They saw fragments of behavior, moments of interaction, glimpses of personality expressed through routine actions. What they could not see was the careful calculation behind every choice, the professional training that shaped every response, or the reasons why someone might choose invisibility over recognition. Derek's growing irritation with what he perceived as Cassandra's entitled passivity had been building for weeks. Each Tuesday morning, he watched her navigate the airport with the same unremarkable efficiency, never acknowledging his authority, never requiring his intervention, never providing him with opportunities to demonstrate his importance in the security process. In Derek's mind, her consistent ability to avoid problems was itself problematic. People who moved through security checkpoints without triggering alarms, causing delays, or requiring additional screening were somehow cheating the system that gave his job meaning. Her competence made his authority feel unnecessary, and unnecessary authority was just another word for powerlessness. The stage was now set for a confrontation that had been building through weeks of misunderstanding, misperception, and mutual invisibility. Neither Derek nor Cassandra fully understood how the other saw the world, and that gap in understanding was about to create consequences neither of them had anticipated. The first hint that Cassandra Vale possessed skills beyond those of an ordinary business traveler came during a mechanical failure at Gate 27B 2 months earlier. A jetway connector had malfunctioned during the boarding process, trapping passengers between the terminal and aircraft while maintenance crews worked to resolve the issue. The situation had created exactly the kind of chaos that revealed people's true nature under pressure. Most passengers had responded predictably, some with vocal complaints about delays, others with resignation to circumstances beyond their control, a few with demands for immediate solutions from airline staff who had no solutions to offer. The businessman who usually conducted merger negotiations ahead of her in security lines had become particularly agitated, threatening to report the incident to corporate headquarters and demanding compensation for his inconvenience. Cassandra had approached the situation differently. While other passengers clustered around the gate desk demanding information, she had quietly positioned herself near an emergency exit, automatically calculating evacuation routes and timing. When an elderly man with a walking cane had struggled to maintain his balance during the mechanical jolting of the jetway, she had moved smoothly to support him without drawing attention to her assistance. Airport Maintenance Supervisor James Park had been monitoring the situation when he noticed something unusual about her behavior. Unlike other passengers who focused on the inconvenience to their travel plans, Cassandra seemed to be conducting a systematic assessment of potential safety risks. Her eyes moved constantly, tracking the positions of other passengers, identifying potential bottleneck points, and evaluating structural stability, indicators that most people wouldn't even notice. When a small child had started crying due to the strange noises coming from the malfunctioning equipment, Cassandra had knelt beside the family and spoken quietly to the mother, pointing out specific technical details that explained the sounds were normal mechanical adjustment processes, rather than signs of danger. Her explanation had demonstrated knowledge of aircraft systems that went far beyond what any casual traveler would possess. James had found himself studying her more carefully as the incident unfolded. Her positioning wasn't random. She had chosen a location that provided clear sight lines to all exits, while maintaining distance from the largest concentration of agitated passengers. When airline personnel had made announcements about the delay, she had been watching their faces and body language rather than just listening to their words, as if evaluating the accuracy and completeness of the information being provided. The incident had resolved after 45 minutes when maintenance crews successfully recalibrated the jetway hydraulics. As passengers began boarding normally, James had expected the woman to join the complaints being filed with customer service representatives. Instead, she had simply collected her briefcase and proceeded to board without comment, as if mechanical failures were routine occurrences that didn't warrant emotional responses. 3 weeks later, another revealing incident had occurred at the TSA checkpoint itself. A college student traveling with his rugby team had accidentally packed a large metal trophy in his carry-on luggage, triggering security alarms and requiring additional screening procedures. The situation had quickly escalated when the student became defensive about the search, claiming discrimination and threatening to file complaints with university administrators. The confrontation had drawn attention from other passengers and caused significant delays in security processing. TSA officers had followed standard protocols for dealing with agitated travelers, but the student's teammates had begun supporting his complaints, creating a group dynamic that complicated resolution efforts. Derek Thornton had been working a different checkpoint that day, but he had moved to assist with crowd control as the situation developed. His approach had been characteristically direct, loud commands, physical positioning that emphasized his authority, and threats of more serious consequences if compliance wasn't immediate. The technique had eventually worked, but not before creating additional tension and further delays. Cassandra had been standing several positions behind the rugby team in the security line, close enough to observe the entire incident, but far enough away to avoid direct involvement. TSA Supervisor Linda Chun had been managing the situation when she noticed that the quiet woman seemed to be tracking multiple elements simultaneously: the emotional state of the agitated student, the positioning of his teammates, the responses of other passengers and the tactical approaches being used by security personnel. When one of the rugby players had started moving toward the metal detectors in apparent support of his teammate, potentially escalating the confrontation, Cassandra had made a subtle movement that positioned her directly in his path. The interaction had appeared completely accidental, a routine adjustment of her briefcase strap that happened to require her to step slightly to one side. But the timing and placement had been perfectly calculated to create a natural barrier. The rugby player had paused, forced to choose between pushing past a small woman or waiting for her to move. The moment of hesitation had been enough for TSA officers to redirect his attention and defuse the potential escalation. Linda Chun had recognized the intervention for what it was, a professional-level crowd control technique executed so smoothly that most observers wouldn't even realize it had been intentional. Later that same day, Linda had pulled Cassandra's travel records to review her background information. The files had shown exactly what she expected: routine business travel patterns, no security incidents, no complaints or commendations, nothing remarkable in any direction. But Linda's instincts, developed through 15 years of airport security work, suggested that someone with such sophisticated situational awareness had received training that went beyond normal civilian experience. The most revealing incident had occurred just 1 week before Derek's confrontation with Cassandra. A medical emergency had developed when an elderly passenger had suffered what appeared to be a heart attack while waiting for his flight. Airport medical personnel had responded quickly, but the situation had created significant crowd control challenges as the baggage handlers had their own perspective. Tony Rodriguez had noticed that Cassandra always checked the same small suitcase, never exceeded weight limits, and never claimed priority handling despite her frequent travel. In Tony's experience, such consistent behavior patterns usually indicated either military training or professional requirements that demanded precise adherence to regulations. Even the janitorial staff had formed opinions about the woman who appeared weekly when family members had begun crowding around the patient, potentially interfering with treatment efforts. Cassandra had quietly approached the man's wife and gently guided her to a position where she could maintain visual contact without blocking medical access. Her manner had been so natural and authoritative that the woman had followed her directions without question, treating her as if she were part of the official response team. Airport medical technician Robert Hayes had noticed the intervention and found it professionally impressive. In his experience, effective crowd management during medical emergencies required specific training and considerable practice. The quiet woman had demonstrated both, executing textbook positioning techniques while maintaining the calm demeanor that prevented additional panic among bystanders. When the patient had been successfully stabilized and transported to a local hospital, Robert had approached Cassandra to thank her for the assistance. She had politely deflected the recognition, claiming she had simply tried to stay out of the way like any considerate passenger. But Robert had worked enough emergencies to recognize the difference between staying out of the way and providing tactical support. And what he had witnessed was definitely the latter. These accumulated observations had created a growing file of informal reports about Cassandra Vale's unusual competencies. Though no single individual possessed enough information to understand the complete picture, airport employees had noticed fragments of advanced training, moments of professional expertise, glimpses of capabilities that didn't match her apparent civilian status. The pattern was becoming clear to anyone with sufficient background to recognize it. But Derek Thornton lacked both the experience and the perspective necessary to interpret the signs correctly. Instead of seeing evidence of professional training, he saw examples of someone trying to appear more competent than circumstances warranted. Instead of recognizing tactical awareness, he perceived arrogant surveillance of his workplace. The collision between Derek's misconceptions and Cassandra's carefully maintained cover was now inevitable, driven by weeks of accumulated misunderstanding that neither of them had chosen to address directly. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hawkins had been observing the security checkpoint dynamics at Meridian International Airport for 3 consecutive Tuesdays. Though her presence went unnoticed by both passengers and staff, her position as Deputy Director of Military Personnel Transit Operations required periodic assessments of civilian airport security procedures, particularly regarding the movement of active duty and retired military personnel through commercial transportation hubs. Patricia's trained eye had immediately identified several individuals whose behavior patterns suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds. A businessman who instinctively checked exit routes upon entering any space. A woman traveling with small children who maintained constant situational awareness despite appearing focused on family management. A maintenance worker whose tool organization and movement patterns reflected years of military precision. But it was Cassandra Vale who had captured Patricia's sustained attention. The first Tuesday, Patricia had noticed Cassandra's approach to the security checkpoint. Unlike civilian travelers who focused primarily on their immediate concerns, finding the correct line, preparing required documents, managing personal belongings, Cassandra conducted systematic assessments that encompassed the entire operational environment. Her observation patterns were too comprehensive and too automatic to be coincidental. Patricia had positioned herself at various points throughout the terminal to observe Cassandra's complete transit process. The woman's route selection demonstrated tactical thinking that went far beyond casual passenger convenience. She consistently chose pathways that provided multiple egress options, avoided bottleneck areas where large crowds could impede movement, and maintained positioning that allowed observation of potential threat vectors. More significantly, Cassandra's interaction patterns with airport personnel revealed someone accustomed to operating within institutional hierarchies while maintaining operational security. She provided exactly the information required by each checkpoint, answered direct questions without volunteering additional details, and moved through security screening with the efficient compliance of someone who understood both the necessity of protocols and the importance of not drawing unnecessary attention. During the second Tuesday observation, Patricia had witnessed the medical emergency response that had impressed airport technician Robert Hayes from her position near the departure gates. Patricia had observed Cassandra's immediate tactical assessment of the situation, the rapid evaluation of crowd dynamics, the identification of family members requiring management, and the smooth intervention that had improved emergency response effectiveness. Without appearing to assert authority, Patricia recognized the technique because she had taught similar crowd management procedures to military personnel, preparing for civilian deployment scenarios. The specific positioning choices, the approach methodology, and the subsequent disengagement all reflected advanced training in emergency response coordination. But what impressed Patricia most was Cassandra's ability to execute these techniques while maintaining her civilian cover identity. The third Tuesday had provided the most revealing observations. Patricia had arrived earlier than usual and positioned herself where she could observe the entire security screening process from beginning to end. She had watched Cassandra's interaction with Derek Thornton, noting the security guard's increasingly aggressive body language and the subtle adjustments in Cassandra's positioning that suggested recognition of a developing threat scenario. Patricia had worked with enough combat veterans to recognize the signs of someone managing post-service anger issues. Derek's posture, facial expressions, and territorial behavior around the security checkpoint all indicated someone struggling with the transition from military authority to civilian employment. His focus on Cassandra suggested he had identified her as a target for displaced frustrations, though Patricia doubted he understood the full implications of his choice. What concerned Patricia most was Cassandra's apparent decision to maintain her cover, rather than diffuse the situation through authority assertion. In Patricia's experience, this suggested either someone operating under deep cover requirements or someone whose actual position was so sensitive that exposure would create consequences extending far beyond personal inconvenience. Patricia had quietly initiated her own background investigation into Cassandra Vale's identity and travel patterns. The information available through standard military personnel databases was surprisingly limited: routine civilian employment records, standard travel documentation, no security clearances or military service indicators. But the absence of information was itself informative to someone with Patricia's level of access to classified personnel systems. The travel pattern analysis had been more revealing. Cassandra's Tuesday flights consistently terminated in Washington, D.C., with return flights scheduled for the same evening. The timing suggested brief, high-priority meetings rather than extended business engagements. Her airline reservation system showed payment through a corporate account registered to a consulting firm that, upon further investigation, appeared to exist primarily as a documentation front for classified travel arrangements. Patricia's security clearance had allowed her to access transportation databases that tracked the movement of personnel associated with sensitive government operations. Cassandra's travel patterns matched profiles associated with briefing schedules for high-level classified projects, though the specific nature of those projects remained beyond Patricia's access authority. The morning of Derek's confrontation with Cassandra, Patricia had arrived at Meridian Airport 30 minutes earlier than her usual observation schedule. Her instincts, developed through 23 years of military service, had suggested that the increasing tension between Derek and Cassandra was approaching a crisis point that would require intervention. She had positioned herself near the priority security checkpoint, where she could observe the complete interaction while maintaining plausible deniability about her presence. Her cover as a routine business traveler would allow her to intervene if necessary, without exposing her actual position or her reasons for monitoring the situation. Patricia had watched Derek's aggressive approach to the checkpoint, noting his elevated stress indicators and the focused attention he was directing toward Cassandra. She had observed Cassandra's calm preparation for security screening, recognizing the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed similar routines under far more dangerous circumstances. When Derek had begun his verbal confrontation with Cassandra, Patricia had moved closer to the checkpoint, preparing to intervene if the situation escalated beyond manageable limits. She had her military identification ready for immediate presentation, along with contact information for base security personnel who could assume control of the incident if Derek's behavior required formal military intervention. But Patricia had also recognized something else in Cassandra's composed response to Derek's aggression, the particular kind of calm that came from someone who possessed capabilities far beyond what the current situation required. It was the confidence of someone who could handle Derek Thornton without assistance, but who was choosing restraint for reasons that had nothing to do with fear or uncertainty. Patricia's assessment was that Cassandra was operating under constraints that prevented her from responding to Derek's challenge with anything approaching her actual capabilities. The question was whether those constraints would hold if Derek's aggression continued to escalate, and what the consequences would be if they didn't. As Derek's confrontation with Cassandra reached the point of physical contact, Patricia had begun moving toward the checkpoint with the intention of asserting military authority to defuse the situation. But she had also activated the secure communication device in her briefcase, preparing to notify her superiors that a Classified personnel situation was developing at a civilian airport that might require immediate damage control protocols. Moment Derek struck Cassandra's shoulder. Patricia knew that whatever constraints had been keeping the situation manageable were about to disappear entirely. She had seen enough combat veterans reach their breaking points to recognize when someone with advanced tactical training decided that restraint was no longer the appropriate response to a threat. Patricia's movement toward the confrontation was now motivated by the urgent need to prevent Derek Thornton from discovering exactly what kind of person he had chosen to assault, because Patricia's experience suggested that such a discovery would not end well for anyone involved in the situation. The moment Derek's hand made contact with Cassandra's shoulder, several interconnected systems at Meridian International Airport began registering anomalies that would take investigators weeks to fully understand. The airport's sophisticated surveillance network, designed to monitor passenger behavior for security threats, detected movement patterns that triggered automated alerts across multiple databases. Security camera feeds from 17 different angles captured the confrontation in high-definition detail. But what the cameras recorded was far more complex than a simple dispute between a security guard and a passenger. Advanced behavioral analysis software, originally developed for counter-terrorism operations, began processing Cassandra's micro-movements and physiological responses with algorithms designed to identify individuals with combat training. The system's artificial intelligence had been programmed to recognize specific combinations of stance, balance, and reaction timing that indicated advanced tactical preparation. Within 0.3 seconds of Derek's physical contact, the behavioral analysis program had flagged Cassandra's response as exhibiting Level 4 threat assessment indicators, patterns associated with individuals possessing lethal force capabilities. Dr. Amanda Foster, the airport's chief security analyst, was monitoring the feeds from her position in the Central Security Operations Center when the automated alerts began cascading across her screens. The behavioral analysis system rarely triggered Level 4 indicators for ordinary passenger disputes, and when it did, the situations typically involved individuals with extensive military or law enforcement backgrounds attempting to conceal their identities. Amanda immediately initiated ENHANCED surveillance protocols, directing additional camera resources toward the priority security checkpoint while simultaneously accessing passenger manifest data for both individuals involved in the confrontation. Derek Thornton's information appeared normally: employment records, background check clearances, disciplinary notices from previous incidents. But when she attempted to access Cassandra Vale's passenger profile, her terminal displayed a message she had never seen before. Classified access restricted. Contact Federal Liaison immediately. The instruction to contact Federal Liaison personnel was part of emergency protocols that Amanda had been briefed on but never expected to use. Such protocols existed for situations involving undercover federal agents, protected witnesses, or individuals whose identities were classified for national security purposes. The appearance of such restrictions in a routine passenger screening dispute suggested that the situation was far more complex than it initially appeared. Amanda's immediate concern was that Derek Thornton might be unknowingly escalating a confrontation with someone whose response capabilities could create significant security risks for the airport. She activated direct communication channels to TSA supervisors at the checkpoint while simultaneously notifying airport police of a developing Code 7 situation, the designation for incidents involving potentially classified personnel. Meanwhile, the airport's integrated communication systems were automatically transmitting copies of the surveillance footage to federal agencies through data sharing protocols established after September 11th. Footage uploads triggered additional automated responses within government databases that had been monitoring Cassandra's travel patterns as part of routine security oversight for classified personnel. At the Department of Defense Personnel Security Monitoring Center in Arlington, Virginia, Duty Officer Captain Michael Brooks received an automated alert indicating that an individual under federal protection protocols was involved in a security incident at a civilian airport. The alert included real-time surveillance feeds, passenger manifest information, and behavioral analysis data suggesting potential compromise of operational security. Captain Brooks immediately recognized the significance of the situation. Personnel under federal protection protocols were typically individuals whose safety was critical to national security operations, key witnesses in classified legal proceedings, undercover operatives transitioning between assignments, or subject matter experts whose knowledge made them targets for foreign intelligence services. The automated systems had already begun implementing containment procedures designed to prevent unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Communication intercepts were activated to monitor any phone calls or electronic messages originating from the airport terminal. Facial recognition databases were cross-referenced to identify any other individuals present who might be associated with foreign intelligence operations. Most critically, the systems had automatically notified Cassandra's designated emergency contact, a priority communication line that connected directly to the Office of Special Projects within the Defense Intelligence Agency. The notification included her current location, the nature of the security incident, and an assessment that her operational cover might be compromised. Director Sarah Mitchell answered the emergency contact line on the first ring, having been expecting some form of crisis given the sensitive nature of Cassandra's current assignment. The automated briefing she received confirmed her worst fears. Their most valuable asset in an ongoing counterintelligence operation was potentially about to be exposed by a civilian airport security dispute. Cassandra's cover identity as a routine business traveler was essential to an operation that had been 18 months in development. She was the only person with access to information that could prevent a significant breach of classified defense technologies. But that access depended entirely on her ability to maintain her civilian persona while conducting meetings with suspected foreign intelligence operatives. Director Mitchell immediately activated emergency response protocols designed for situations where critical assets faced potential exposure. Military transportation assets were diverted to Meridian Airport for immediate extraction if necessary. Legal teams prepared injunctions to prevent media coverage if the incident escalated beyond manageable limits. Most importantly, a rapid response team with authority to assume control of civilian law enforcement situations was dispatched with instructions to reach the airport within 25 minutes, but the most immediate concern was whether Cassandra could maintain her cover long enough for professional intervention to resolve the situation. Director Mitchell's experience suggested that someone with Cassandra's training and background could easily neutralize Derek Thornton's aggression. But such a response would inevitably raise questions that could compromise months of careful operational preparation. Satellite communication system that connected Director Mitchell's office to field operatives allowed her to monitor the situation in real time through Cassandra's concealed emergency transmitter. The device, disguised as a standard medical alert pendant, transmitted audio feeds and basic physiological data that indicated Cassandra's stress levels and physical condition. What Director Mitchell heard through the audio feed was Derek Thornton's increasingly aggressive verbal assault, followed by the unmistakable sound of physical contact. The physiological data showed that Cassandra's heart rate had increased marginally, but remained well within normal parameters. The Response of someone maintaining professional calm rather than someone experiencing fear or panic. Director Mitchell knew that Cassandra was now facing a choice between maintaining operational security and responding appropriately to a physical assault. Either decision carried significant risks, but the wrong choice could compromise an intelligence operation that had already cost millions of dollars and countless hours of preparation. The director activated direct communication protocols that would allow her to provide real-time guidance to Cassandra through the concealed transmitter system. But she also authorized the rapid response team to implement immediate intervention procedures if Cassandra's cover appeared to be failing beyond recovery. As multiple systems and agencies began coordinating responses to what appeared to be a routine airport security dispute, the only person unaware of the growing crisis was Derek Tharton himself, who remained focused on what he perceived as a simple matter of asserting his authority over an uncooperative passenger. The collision between Derek's local concerns and the federal systems now mobilizing to protect Cassandra's operational security was about to create consequences that neither of them had anticipated. Investigation that followed the automated alerts began simultaneously across multiple federal agencies, each pursuing different aspects of what had initially appeared to be a routine airport security incident. Within minutes of the surveillance system's behavioral analysis triggering Level 4 threat indicators, investigators at the Defense Intelligence Agency began accessing archived operational records that had been classified at the highest levels of government secrecy. Agent Thomas Reeves, a 15-year veteran of counterintelligence operations, received the emergency assignment to review Cassandra Vale's complete operational history. The files he accessed revealed a career that explained both her extraordinary tactical awareness and the elaborate measures taken to protect her civilian cover. Identity: Cassandra had spent 8 years as part of Operation Silent Shield, a classified program that embedded specially trained operatives within international business networks to monitor and intercept attempts by foreign governments to acquire sensitive American defense technologies. Her official cover as a logistics consultant had provided access to corporate environments where such technology transfers typically occurred, while her advanced training had enabled her to identify and neutralize threats that conventional intelligence gathering could not detect. The operational records detailed assignments that read like excerpts from spy novels. Cassandra had posed as a trade conference attendee while documenting attempts by Chinese intelligence operatives to recruit American defense contractors. She had worked undercover at technology companies where Russian agents were attempting to steal classified research data. She had spent months developing relationships with suspected foreign operatives while gathering evidence of their activities, but her most significant accomplishment had been the disruption of what intelligence analysts called the Prometheus Network, a sophisticated operation involving multiple foreign intelligence services working together to acquire American military technology through seemingly legitimate business transactions. Cassandra's infiltration of this network had prevented the transfer of advanced missile guidance systems that could have fundamentally altered the balance of power in several regional conflicts. Agent Reeves discovered that Cassandra's current assignment involved monitoring the final stages of Prometheus Network prosecution efforts. Several key operatives had avoided capture during the initial arrests, and intelligence suggested they were planning retaliatory operations against American assets. Cassandra's role was to serve as early warning detection for any attempts to target defense facilities or personnel in the Pacific Northwest region. Her weekly trips to Washington, D.C. were briefing sessions where she reported on potential threat indicators while receiving updates on the status of ongoing counterintelligence investigations. The timing of these meetings was deliberately irregular to prevent foreign surveillance from establishing patterns that could compromise her activities or reveal her true identity to hostile intelligence services. The implications of Derek Thornton's confrontation with Cassandra became clear as Agent Reeves reviewed the threat assessment data. If her cover identity was compromised, foreign operatives who had been searching for the person responsible for dismantling the Prometheus network would finally have a target for their planned retaliation. The consequences could extend far beyond Cassandra's personal safety, to include attacks on her family, her colleagues, or the defense facility she was monitoring. Simultaneously, FBI counterintelligence specialist Agent Lisa Shun was conducting her own investigation into the security implications of the incident at Meridian Airport. Her focus was on determining whether Derek Thornton's aggressive behavior might be connected to foreign intelligence operations designed to expose undercover American operatives. Agent Chun's analysis of Derek's background revealed a pattern of employment difficulties and personal problems that made him a potential target for recruitment by hostile intelligence services. His military discharge following disciplinary issues, his failed applications to law enforcement agencies, and his ongoing financial difficulties created vulnerabilities that foreign operatives often exploited when seeking to place assets within American security infrastructure. However, a comprehensive review of Derek's activities, communications, and financial records found no evidence of foreign contact or influence. His confrontation with Cassandra appeared to be the result of personal anger and poor judgment, rather than coordinated intelligence operations. This conclusion was both reassuring and problematic. Reassuring because it suggested no systematic compromise of airport security, but problematic because it meant Derek's actions were unpredictable and not subject to the rational calculations that governed professional intelligence work. At the Central Intelligence Agency's Domestic Contact Service, analyst Dr. Rebecca Martinez was reviewing intelligence reports related to known foreign operatives who might be monitoring Cassandra's activities. The Prometheus network investigation had identified several individuals who remained at large and were believed to be operating within the United States under various cover identities. Dr. Martinez's investigation focused on whether any of these individuals might be present at Meridian Airport during Cassandra's weekly travel routine. Surveillance footage from the past several months was processed through facial recognition systems designed to identify persons of interest to counterintelligence operations. The analysis revealed no matches with known foreign operatives, but it did identify several individuals whose travel patterns coincided suspiciously with Cassandra's schedule. One particularly concerning discovery was the presence of a businessman who had appeared in airport surveillance footage on 4 of the past 6 Tuesdays when Cassandra had traveled through Meridian. His passenger manifests showed destinations that changed frequently, but always involved cities where intelligence analysts suspected Prometheus network operatives might be operating. While this could be coincidental, the pattern was significant enough to warrant immediate investigation. Dr. Martinez initiated priority surveillance on the individual, designated as Subject 47, until his identity could be confirmed. Background checks revealed a consulting business with clients that included several companies previously investigated for potential technology transfer violations. His frequent international travel and pattern of last-minute flight changes were consistent with intelligence operational requirements. The possibility that Derek's confrontation with Cassandra might have occurred while hostile operatives were conducting surveillance created an entirely new level of security concern. If foreign intelligence services had been monitoring Cassandra's activities, Derek's public challenge to her authority might have provided them with confirmation of her true identity and operational significance. At the Department of Defense, Colonel James Harrison was coordinating the multi-agency response to what had evolved from a routine airport incident into a potential national security crisis. His responsibilities included ensuring that Cassandra's operational security remained intact while managing the federal response to Derek's assault without creating additional exposure risks. Colonel Harrison's immediate concern was the timeline for potential foreign intelligence response to any compromise of Cassandra's cover identity. Intelligence estimates suggested that if hostile operatives had been monitoring the airport and witnessed Derek's confrontation, they would likely attempt to confirm Cassandra's identity and initiate retaliatory operations within 48 to 72 hours. This timeline created urgent pressure to complete the federal investigation while implementing protective measures for Cassandra and her known associates. Military protection details were assigned to her family members. Enhanced security was established for the defense facilities she had been monitoring, and emergency extraction procedures were prepared in case her position became untenable. But the most immediate challenge was managing Derek Thornton's knowledge of the incident. His position as an airport security guard provided him with access to information and facilities that could be exploited by foreign operatives seeking to gather intelligence about Cassandra's activities. The possibility that Derek might discuss the incident with colleagues or attempt to investigate Cassandra's background created additional security vulnerabilities that required careful management. Colonel Harrison authorized the implementation of containment protocols designed to prevent unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information while maintaining the appearance of routine law enforcement response to Derek's assault. The challenge was protecting national security interests without revealing the classified nature of those interests to individuals who lacked appropriate security clearances. The federal investigation had revealed that what appeared to be a simple confrontation between a security guard and a passenger was actually a collision between Derek Thornton's personal problems and one of the most sensitive counterintelligence operations currently active within the United States. The moment Derek struck Cassandra's shoulder, the immediate environment around the priority security checkpoint transformed in ways that most observers couldn't fully comprehend. What appeared to be a routine dispute between an overzealous security guard and a patient passenger was actually a carefully orchestrated revelation that would fundamentally alter everyone's understanding of power, authority, and consequence. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hawkins had moved within 10 feet of the confrontation when Derek's hand made physical contact with Cassandra. From her position, Patricia could see the micro-expressions that crossed both participants' faces in the seconds following the assault. Derek's mixture of satisfaction and escalating anger, and Cassandra's subtle shift from professional tolerance to operational assessment. Patricia recognized the moment when Cassandra made her decision. The slight adjustment in stance, the almost imperceptible change in breathing pattern, and the way her eyes briefly swept the surrounding area to identify potential collateral risks all indicated someone transitioning from passive observation to active response protocols. But instead of the immediate tactical reaction Patricia expected, Cassandra reached slowly into her jacket pocket with movements so deliberate they seemed choreographed. Dr. Amanda Foster, monitoring the situation from the Central Security Operations Center, watched as Cassandra withdrew what appeared to be a standard leather credential wallet. The behavioral analysis software continued tracking both participants' biometric indicators, but the readings it displayed were unlike anything Dr. Foster had seen in 5 years of airport security monitoring. While Derek's stress levels showed the elevated patterns typical of someone experiencing an adrenaline surge, Cassandra's readings remained remarkably stable, suggesting someone accustomed to far more stressful situations. Airport TSA supervisor Linda Chun had been approaching the checkpoint to intervene when she observed Cassandra's response to Derek's aggression. Linda's 15 years of experience had taught her to recognize different types of authority when she saw them. There was the authority that came from institutional positions, the authority that came from personal confidence, and the authority that came from capabilities others couldn't imagine. Cassandra's calm preparation to reveal her credentials suggested the latter category. Derek himself remained focused on what he perceived as vindication of his suspicions about Cassandra's behavior. Her failure to respond with anger or defensive arguments confirmed his belief that she had been attempting to circumvent security procedures through passive manipulation. The wallet she was withdrawing probably contained some kind of frequent flyer card or corporate travel document that she thought would impress him. But Derek was prepared to demonstrate that such credentials meant nothing when confronted with real authority. First indication that Derek's assumptions were incorrect came from the reaction of TSA officer Marcus Thompson, who was positioned approximately 15 feet away when Cassandra opened her wallet. Marcus had served 8 years in the Army before joining TSA, and he immediately recognized something significant about the way Cassandra was handling her credentials. The careful, respectful manner that military personnel used when presenting identification to superior officers. Marcus moved closer to observe the exchange, his instincts suggesting that whatever Cassandra was about to reveal would fundamentally change the dynamics of the confrontation. His military experience had taught him to recognize the difference between civilian authority and military command presence, and everything about Cassandra's bearing suggested the latter. Airport Police Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez received the code 7 alert on his radio just as Cassandra opened her wallet for Derek's inspection. The Code 7 designation was relatively rare at Meridian Airport, typically reserved for situations involving federal law enforcement personnel or individuals with classified government connections. Kevin began moving toward the security checkpoint while simultaneously requesting backup units and notifying airport administration of the developing situation. The leather wallet Cassandra held contained several items that Derek examined with growing confusion. A standard driver's license showed her civilian identity and address, nothing remarkable about either. A corporate credit card confirmed her business traveler status. But behind these routine documents was something that Derek's limited experience couldn't immediately process: a military identification card with photograph, rank insignia, and security clearance information that indicated access levels far beyond anything he had encountered during his own abbreviated military service. Derek stared at the identification card for several seconds, his brain struggling to reconcile what he was seeing with his assumptions about the woman he had just assaulted. The card identified Cassandra as Colonel Cassandra Vale, United States Air Force, with a security clearance designation that Derek recognized as significantly higher than any clearance level he had ever possessed. The card also contained several additional markings and codes that meant nothing to Derek, but would have been immediately recognizable to anyone with experience in military intelligence operations. Colonel Patricia Hawkins could see Derek's face from her position near the checkpoint, and she recognized the exact moment when his understanding of the situation began to shift. The aggressive confidence that had characterized his approach to Cassandra was replaced by uncertainty, and the beginning of genuine fear as he realized that he had physically assaulted a superior officer in full view of multiple witnesses and security cameras. TSA supervisor Linda Chun approached the confrontation with growing concern about the potential ramifications for airport security operations. If Derek had unknowingly assaulted a high-ranking military officer, The incident would require immediate notification of federal authorities and could result in significant scrutiny of airport security procedures. Linda's primary concern was ensuring that proper protocols were followed to minimize damage to both the individuals involved and the institutions. Reputation. Airport Police Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez arrived at the security checkpoint as Derek was processing the implications of Cassandra's revealed identity. Kevin's experience with federal law enforcement partnerships had taught him that situations involving high-ranking military personnel required careful handling to avoid jurisdictional complications and potential diplomatic incidents. He immediately began assessing whether the situation required transfer to federal jurisdiction or could be managed through local law enforcement channels. Dr. Amanda Foster, observing from the security center, noticed that the behavioral analysis software had shifted its assessment categories as soon as Cassandra revealed her military credentials. The system's artificial intelligence had access to databases that cross-referenced military ranks with threat assessment protocols, and colonel-level officers with high security clearances were automatically classified as individuals whose safety and security had national importance. Revelation of Cassandra's military rank created immediate implications that extended far beyond the airport security checkpoint. Military regulations regarding assault on superior officers carried consequences significantly more severe than civilian legal penalties. Derek's actions had potentially violated multiple articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, even though he was no longer on active duty, because his assault had been committed against a superior officer while she was traveling on official business. But the most significant implication was the potential compromise of whatever classified mission or assignment had brought Colonel Vale through Meridian Airport on a weekly basis. Military officers with her level of security clearance typically traveled under civilian cover for reasons related to national security, and any exposure of their true identity could have consequences extending far beyond the immediate participants. Derek's growing realization of these implications was visible in his changing body language and facial expressions as the full weight of his mistake became clear. The casual authority he had exercised over airport passengers was revealed as meaningless when confronted with genuine military rank and the institutional power it represented. The confrontation had reached the point where Derek's perception of the situation was being fundamentally challenged by evidence that contradicted every assumption he had made about Cassandra Vale and his own authority to challenge her presence at the security checkpoint. The revelation of Colonel Cassandra Vale's true identity created a cascade of reactions that rippled through the security checkpoint like a shockwave, fundamentally altering the power dynamics and forcing every witness to reassess their understanding of what they had just observed. The transformation was immediate and complete, as if someone had suddenly switched on bright lights in a room where everyone had been operating in darkness. Derek Thornton's face underwent a series of expressions that told the complete story of his psychological collapse in real time. The aggressive confidence that had driven his confrontation with Cassandra crumbled first, replaced by confusion as his brain struggled to process information that contradicted every assumption he had made. His eyes moved repeatedly between Cassandra's military identification and her calm face, as if expecting one or both to reveal themselves as elaborate deceptions. The confusion quickly gave way to fear as Derek began calculating the potential consequences of his actions. His own military service, brief and problematic though it had been, had taught him enough about military hierarchy to understand that assaulting a colonel was not merely a serious offense. It was the kind of mistake that could destroy lives completely and permanently. The casual workplace authority he had been exercising moments earlier was revealed as pathetically insignificant when measured against the institutional power represented by Cassandra's rank and security clearance. But Derek's most profound realization was that his assault had been witnessed by multiple individuals who were now looking at him with expressions that ranged from professional concern to barely concealed disgust. A supervisor Linda Chun's face showed the particular kind of disappointment that superior officers reserved for subordinates who had committed unforgivably stupid mistakes. Airport Police Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez was already reaching for his radio to initiate whatever procedures were required when airport security personnel assaulted federal military officers. Officer Marcus Thompson, whose military background enabled him to fully appreciate the severity of Derek's transgression, stepped forward with the measured authority of someone accustomed to managing crisis situations. "Sir," he addressed Derek with the kind of formal courtesy that made clear this was no longer a casual workplace interaction. "I need you to step back and remain silent while we sort this out." Marcus's intervention was perfectly timed to prevent Derek from making his situation worse through additional poor decisions. Derek's mouth had been opening and closing, like someone struggling to formulate words that might somehow explain or justify what had occurred. But Marcus's command authority, backed by years of military experience and current institutional position, was sufficient to impose order on Derek's growing panic. Colonel Patricia Hawkins chose this moment to approach the checkpoint, her own military bearing making her identity obvious to anyone with experience recognizing command presence. She addressed Cassandra with the professional courtesy appropriate between officers of equivalent rank, while simultaneously establishing herself as someone qualified to assess the situation's implications. "Colonel Vale," Patricia said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to managing sensitive situations. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hawkins, Deputy Director of Military Personnel Transit Operations. I've been observing the situation, and I'm prepared to assist with whatever resolution procedures are appropriate." The introduction served multiple purposes beyond simple identification. Patricia's title indicated that she possessed both the institutional authority and the security clearance necessary to understand the classified implications of Cassandra's presence at the airport. Her offer of assistance was phrased in the diplomatic language that military officers used when offering to help colleagues navigate potentially complex jurisdictional issues. But most importantly, Patricia's intervention established a framework for managing the incident that would protect both Cassandra's operational security and the airport's institutional interests. Her presence meant that the situation could be resolved through military channels rather than civilian law enforcement procedures that might create unwanted publicity or bureaucratic complications. Dr. Amanda Foster, monitoring the developing situation from the security center, realized that her role was shifting from routine surveillance to damage control coordination. The presence of two high-ranking military officers at a civilian airport security checkpoint suggested operational activities that could have national security implications, and her responsibility was to ensure that airport systems supported whatever resolution procedures they implemented. Amanda activated additional security protocols designed for situations involving federal law enforcement or military personnel. Communication channels to airport administration were open to provide immediate notification of any special requirements. Surveillance footage was secured under enhanced protection procedures that would prevent unauthorized access while ensuring availability for any subsequent investigations. Cassandra herself remained remarkably composed throughout the unfolding crisis, her behavior suggesting someone accustomed to operating under circumstances where maintaining operational security required constant vigilance about revealing too much information. Her acknowledgement of Patricia's introduction was professionally appropriate, but deliberately limited to avoid confirming details about her assignment or activities. "Thank you," "Colonel Hawkins," Cassandra replied, her voice maintaining the same steady tone she had used throughout Derek's increasingly aggressive confrontation. "I appreciate your assistance in resolving this matter efficiently." The exchange between the two colonels was conducted in the formal, diplomatic language that military officers used when discussing sensitive matters in public settings. Every word was carefully chosen to convey necessary information while avoiding any statements that might compromise operational security or create legal complications. For subsequent proceedings, Derek's position had become untenable in ways that extended far beyond simple workplace discipline. His assault on a superior officer had been witnessed by multiple individuals with the authority and responsibility to report such incidents through appropriate military and civilian channels. His employment at the airport was certainly terminated, but the more serious question was whether his actions constituted federal crimes that would require prosecution through military or civilian court systems. Airport Police Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez was coordinating with his dispatcher to determine the appropriate procedures for transferring custody of the incident to federal authorities. Military personnel operating under classified assignments required specialized handling that exceeded local law enforcement capabilities, and Kevin's experience suggested that the situation would soon involve federal agents with jurisdiction over crimes committed against military personnel. TSA Supervisor Linda Chun was conducting her own assessment of the institutional implications for airport security operations. Derek's behavior had demonstrated serious failures in personnel screening and supervisory oversight that could result in federal investigations of TSA procedures. Her immediate priority was implementing damage control measures that would demonstrate institutional competence while cooperating fully with whatever federal investigations might follow. The transformation of Derek from authority figure to subject of federal investigation had occurred with stunning rapidity, demonstrating the awesome power of institutional hierarchy when properly invoked. His casual exercise of workplace authority had collided with genuine federal power, and the collision had revealed the complete insignificance of his position when measured against the vast machinery of government institutions. Revelation phase of the confrontation was complete, but the aftermath was only beginning to unfold as multiple agencies and jurisdictions prepared to address the consequences of Derek's catastrophic misjudgment. The aftermath of Colonel Vale's revelation created a profound transformation in the atmosphere surrounding the security checkpoint that extended far beyond the immediate participants. Word of the incident spread through the airport's informal communication networks with the speed that only truly shocking events could achieve. Carried by airport employees who had witnessed portions of the confrontation and understood the extraordinary nature of what they had observed. Within 30 minutes of Derek's assault on Colonel Vale, federal agents from 3 different agencies had arrived at Meridian International Airport to assume control of the investigation and implement security protocols designed to protect classified personnel and operations. The response demonstrated the vast institutional machinery that activated automatically when high-ranking military officers with sensitive security clearances were involved in civilian incidents. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations took primary jurisdiction over the criminal aspects of Derek's assault, while her colleagues coordinated with airport security to secure surveillance footage and witness statements. Agent Walsh's immediate concern was ensuring that Derek's actions had not compromised Colonel Vale's operational security or endangered any ongoing classified missions. Derek himself had been removed from the security checkpoint area and was being held in a small conference room normally used for airline crew briefings. His transformation from authority figure to federal suspect had been complete and devastating. The confident aggression that had characterized his approach to Colonel Vale had been replaced by the hollow-eyed shock of someone whose life had been permanently altered by a single moment of catastrophic judgment. Airport employees who had previously treated Derek as a colleague now avoided eye contact when discussing the incident. His supervisors spoke about him in the past tense, as if his employment had already been terminated and his presence at the airport had become a historical footnote. The casual workplace authority he had exercised for 8 months was revealed as having been entirely dependent on institutional tolerance that had now been withdrawn completely. Colonel Vale had been escorted to a secure area of the airport where she could be debriefed by federal investigators without compromising her operational cover or exposing details of her classified assignment. Her calm professional demeanor throughout the crisis had impressed even experienced federal agents who were accustomed to working with military personnel under stressful circumstances. The debriefing process revealed the full scope of Derek's mistake and its potential implications for national security. Colonel Vale's weekly travel through Meridian Airport was part of a counterintelligence operation that had been 18 months in development, involving coordination between multiple agencies and requiring absolute secrecy to prevent foreign operatives from identifying American intelligence assets. Derek's public challenge to her authority and the subsequent revelation of her military rank had potentially compromised an operation that represented millions of dollars in resources and countless hours of preparation. The possibility that hostile intelligence services might have been monitoring the airport and witnessed the confrontation created urgent requirements for damage assessment and operational security review. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hawkins found herself serving as a liaison between the various agencies now involved in managing the crisis. Her background in military personnel security made her uniquely qualified to assess the operational implications of Derek's assault while coordinating with civilian authorities who lacked appropriate security clearances to fully understand the classified aspects of the situation. Patricia's preliminary assessment was that Colonel Vale's cover identity had been irreparably compromised by the public nature of Derek's confrontation and the subsequent revelation of her military rank. The number of witnesses, the extensive surveillance footage, and the involvement of multiple airport employees meant that maintaining secrecy about her true identity was no longer possible. This conclusion required immediate activation of contingency plans that had been developed for exactly such scenarios. Colonel Vale would need to be extracted from her current assignment and provided with enhanced security protection while intelligence analysts assessed whether foreign operatives had gained access to information that could threaten her safety or the safety of her family. The ripple effects of the incident extended throughout the airport's organizational structure as administrators struggled to manage the institutional implications of having an employee assault a high-ranking military officer. Airport Director Margaret Richardson found herself coordinating with federal agencies while simultaneously preparing explanations for airline partners, local government officials, and media organizations that would inevitably learn about the incident. The legal consequences for Derek were becoming clearer as federal prosecutors reviewed the evidence and applicable statutes. His assault on Colonel Vale violated multiple federal laws protecting military personnel, and his actions had occurred in a federal facility under circumstances that made the crimes particularly serious. The possibility of a lengthy federal prison sentence was becoming increasingly likely as prosecutors assembled their case, but the most profound transformation was occurring among the airport employees who had witnessed Derek's behavior and Colonel Vale's response. TSA officers, airline personnel, maintenance workers, and security guards were all reassessing their understanding of authority, respect, and the importance of treating all passengers with professional courtesy, regardless of their apparent status. Marcus Thompson, the former Army sergeant who had intervened to prevent Derek from making his situation worse, became an informal spokesperson for employees who were struggling to process the lessons of the incident. His military background enabled him to explain the significance of military hierarchy and the extraordinary nature of Derek's transgression to colleagues who lacked such experience. What Derek did wasn't just assault, Marcus explained to a group of TSA officers during their break. When you attack a superior officer, you're not just hitting one person. You're attacking the entire chain of command and everything it represents. The military doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior because it undermines the foundation of military discipline and order. The educational aspect of the incident extended beyond simple discussions of military protocol to broader questions about how civilian employees should interact with passengers whose backgrounds and authority might not be immediately apparent. Airport administrators began developing new training programs designed to emphasize respectful treatment of all passengers and proper procedures for handling disputes without resorting to aggressive confrontation. Colonel Vale's departure from Meridian Airport occurred under heavy federal security protection, with multiple agencies coordinating to ensure her safe transportation to a secure facility, where she could be debriefed and provided with whatever protection her situation required. Her exit marked the end of an operational assignment that had been crucial to American counterintelligence efforts, but had been terminated by Derek's moment of poor judgment. The empty conference room where Derek had been held for questioning became a symbol of how quickly institutional authority could be transferred from one person to another when circumstances revealed the true distribution of power. The casual workplace dominance he had exercised over passengers and colleagues had been replaced by federal jurisdiction and the awesome machinery of military justice. Airport operations continued normally, but with a subdued atmosphere that reflected everyone's awareness that they had witnessed something extraordinary, the collision between assumed authority and genuine power, with consequences that would resonate far beyond the immediate participants. The transformation phase of the crisis was complete, but the long-term implications were only beginning to unfold as multiple institutions prepared to address the damage caused by Derek Thornton's catastrophic failure to recognize the difference between appearance and reality. 6 months after the incident at Meridian International Airport, the ripple effects of Derek Thornton's confrontation with Colonel Cassandra Vale had fundamentally transformed not only the lives of those directly involved, but the entire culture and operational philosophy of airport security operations throughout the Pacific Northwest region. The lessons learned from that Tuesday morning had created lasting changes that touched every aspect of how authority, respect, and professional conduct were understood and practiced in civilian aviation security. Derek Thornton himself had disappeared from public view entirely, his federal conviction on charges of assaulting a military officer having resulted in a 3-year prison sentence that served as a stark reminder of the consequences that could follow from moments of poorly controlled anger. His case had become a teaching example in federal law enforcement training programs, illustrating how civilian misconduct could escalate into serious federal crimes when it involved military personnel operating under classified assignments. The apartment Derek had occupied above the Thai restaurant sat empty, his former neighbors occasionally wondering what had happened to the angry man who had lived among them without anyone understanding the depth of his problems or the trajectory that would. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations took primary jurisdiction over the criminal aspects of Derek's assault, while her colleagues coordinated with airport security to secure surveillance footage and witness statements. Agent Walsh's immediate concern was ensuring that Derek's actions had not compromised Colonel Vale's operational security or endangered any ongoing classified missions. Derek himself had been removed from the security checkpoint area and was being held in a small conference room normally used for airline crew briefings. His transformation from authority figure to federal suspect had been complete and devastating. The confident aggression that had characterized Her family had been relocated as a precautionary measure, and her children had been enrolled in schools with enhanced security protocols designed to protect dependents of military personnel involved in sensitive operations. The disruption to their lives had been significant but manageable, and Cassandra had continued her specialized work with the satisfaction of knowing that her years of dedication to national security had prevented multiple attempts by foreign governments to acquire American defense technologies. The broader intelligence community had conducted extensive reviews of personnel security protocols to identify ways to prevent similar compromises in the future. New procedures were developed for managing the travel requirements of undercover operatives, with particular attention to civilian airport environments where hostile surveillance was always possible, and where interactions with inadequately trained security personnel could create unexpected vulnerabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hawkins had been promoted to colonel and assigned to lead a new directorate focused on protecting military personnel who operated in civilian environments. Her experience managing the crisis at Meridian Airport had demonstrated the need for better coordination between military and civilian authorities when sensitive operations intersected with routine civilian activities. Patricia's new position involved developing training programs for civilian airport security personnel, teaching them to recognize indicators that might suggest passengers with classified backgrounds, while emphasizing the importance of treating all travelers with professional respect regardless of their apparent status. Her work had contributed to significant improvements in how military personnel were treated when traveling through civilian transportation systems. At Meridian International Airport itself, the transformation had been comprehensive and lasting. New Director James Morrison had implemented sweeping changes to personnel screening, training procedures, and supervisory oversight designed to prevent the kind of aggressive behavior that had characterized Derek's approach to passenger interactions. The airport had become a model for other transportation facilities seeking to improve their security operations while maintaining respect for passenger rights. TSA Officer Marcus Thompson had been promoted to supervisor and had become the primary instructor for new employee orientation programs that emphasized de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, and proper procedures for handling disputes with passengers who might have backgrounds or authority that weren't immediately apparent. His military experience and his direct observation of Derek's confrontation with Colonel Vale made him uniquely qualified to teach these essential skills. The training programs Marcus developed had been adopted by airports throughout the region, creating standardized approaches to passenger interaction that significantly reduced incidents of unnecessary confrontation while improving overall security effectiveness. His work had earned recognition from federal transportation security administrators who were seeking ways to improve the professionalism of civilian airport security operations. Dr. Amanda Foster had expanded her security analysis programs to include enhanced monitoring of employee behavior patterns, developing algorithms that could identify personnel who might be experiencing the kind of personal problems that had contributed to Derek's aggressive behavior. Her work had contributed to early intervention programs that provided counseling and support to employees before their personal difficulties could affect their professional performance or create security risks. The behavioral analysis software that had initially detected unusual patterns in Cassandra's responses had been refined to better distinguish between passengers with legitimate security backgrounds and those who might represent actual threats. These improvements had enhanced airport security while reducing the likelihood of false alerts that could compromise the operational security of undercover military or law enforcement personnel. Airport employees throughout The region had internalized the lessons of Derek's mistake through formal training programs, and informal discussions had emphasized the fundamental principle that had been demonstrated so dramatically that Tuesday morning: never assume you understand someone's true background, authority, or capabilities based solely on their appearance or apparent status. Raymond, the coffee cart operator who had served Colonel Vale every Tuesday for months, had become something of a local legend for his respectful treatment of all customers, regardless of their apparent importance. His approach to customer service, treating everyone with dignity while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, had become a model for airport service. Personnel throughout the region, the conference room where Derek had been held for federal questioning, had been converted into a training facility where new airport employees learned about proper procedures for handling difficult situations without resorting to aggressive confrontation. The transformation of the space from a place of consequence to a place of education symbolized the broader changes that had occurred throughout the airport's organizational culture. The most lasting legacy of the incident was the widespread understanding that strength, authority, and capability often existed in forms that weren't immediately recognizable to casual observers. Airport employees had learned to treat every passenger with the respect that might be due to someone whose true background and achievements far exceeded their apparent civilian status. Incident had become a teaching story shared throughout the aviation security community, illustrating how quickly situations could escalate when personal prejudices and professional misconduct intersected with genuine authority and institutional power. The lesson was clear: in a world where appearances could deceive and where true strength often chose to remain hidden, the wisest course was always to treat others with the respect and professionalism they might deserve, rather than the treatment their appearance might seem to invite. The collision between Derek's assumptions and Cassandra's reality had created lasting changes that protected both military personnel and civilian employees, ensuring that future interactions would be governed by mutual respect rather than casual prejudice and aggressive assertion of imaginary authority. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.